Today, I want to talk to you about Alzheimer's because September, as I'm recording this, is World Alzheimer's Month. And actually, as I wrote my blog post on the 21st of September, it's also known as World Alzheimer's Day. Now, for many people, the thought of Alzheimer and dementia is really scary and of great concern, whether it's the concern of our older loved ones developing this disease or, in fact, ourselves that might develop the disease. But what I want to talk about today is the impact of how and the way in which we eat as one factor alone may have a really positive impact on the risk of developing the disease. Now, to start with, I just want to talk about dementia in relation to Alzheimer. Dementia is related to, of course, cognitive decline. It gets progressively worse, memory and clarity of thought and mental reasoning. It gets progressively worse as time goes on. And Alzheimer is one type of dementia of which they think that 60 to 80% of all of dementia is this Alzheimer's disease. Now, it has become the number one cause of death in the UK, so it's understandable the concern that people have over and above the day-to-day impact it has on people's lives. And of course, we're not set up as a society to be dealing with this at all. We don't have the tools and the resources, and we don't have any methods to particularly halt the progression of the disease. So it's really interesting to understand that there are more and more research studies that are being done and coming out showing our lifestyle factors and the impact that this has on the progression of the diseases like Alzheimer's. And I want to talk to you today about one particular aspect of how we eat, which is to do with time restricted eating. And there's been some really positive studies. Of course, it is early days, but why wait until you've got way more research out there before you start to take action with these things? The minutest bit of research which shows a positive impact of protection from cognitive decline needs to be jumped on, because anything we can do ourselves to halt the progression is something that's really positive, because it's in our own hands and our own responsibility. We can take that action ourselves. So what is time restricted eating? This is when we eat between a particular window of the day, and you fast, as in not eating for the rest of that time in the 24-hour cycle. It sounds like it could be difficult to do, but it really isn't difficult. So let me explain. The best way I think about this is to say that for a typical person leading quite a busy life, family or working or whatever it might be, that you have finished eating your evening meal by 8 p.m. and you would not eat again till 8 o'clock in the morning. It should be perfectly possible to do that if you're eating the right things by 8 o'clock at night and you've had a proper evening meal with some appropriate food consisting of protein and some good fats and fiber in vegetables. If you eat at 8 o'clock, it should be perfectly reasonable for you to be able to go through till 8 o'clock the next morning. And that is seen as the minimum window that we need. It's this known as this 12-hour fast, and you're eating in a 12-hour time restricted eating pattern. You may extend that a little bit so that you don't eat until 10 a.m., creating a 14-hour fast. Or even you may on some days decide that you're not going to have anything to eat until midday. You don't really want to go beyond that, and that creates a 16-hour fast, and you're then eating in an 8-hour window. This is not looking at calorie counting at all. It's looking at the hours with which you eat. And it is worth bearing in mind that you should not be adding milk to your hot drinks like tea and coffee, because that is a food. So 12-hour is the minimum fast. And what this creates is this 12-hour fast when your body is in rest and digest. It's able to digest the food and the food is cleared out of the system. And it also allows something called autophagy to take place. I'm learning more and more about autophagy. What autophagy is during the time of a fast, The cells are able to break down, they're able to be recycled, we're able to create and form new cells in the body, whether it's in the physical part of the body or in the brain. Every cell in the body needs to go through this process called autophagy, the breakdown, the renewal, the recycling of our cells. And it's only when autophagy is able to work optimally, and it works optimally when we've had a 12-hour minimum fast, that we can ensure that we're helping to support our cells to perform all of their functions at their best. So looking at some research that came out in May, it was a systematic review of all the available research on time-restricted eating and cognition and mental health in adults. And it found that time-restricted eating did improve cognition and it reduced the Alzheimer's pathology in the brain. Now, let me explain a little bit more about the things that they found with this. They found that it delays the onset and progression of neurodegeneration. Neuro, that's in the brain, the degeneration of the function in the brain. It slowed down the inflammatory markers in the brain. We do not want inflammation taking place. And it particularly, very interestingly, helped with the regulation of our natural circadian rhythms. You know, our circadian clock, this manages and monitors when we should wake up, when we should naturally go to sleep. And actually, a time restricted eating pattern really helped encourage the body to work within our natural circadian rhythms, our natural sleep wake cycle. And by eating within the windows of the natural circadian patterns, this in turn helped to reduce amyloid plaques in the brain. These are the protein markers associated, one of the markers associated with the progression of the disease. The other aspect is when there is a reasonable fast of this 12-hour plus, it really helps to regulate glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. Now, there is a new phenomenon that's been going around in relation to Alzheimer's disease, known as type 3 diabetes. You'll all be familiar with type 2 diabetes, which is when the cells are not sensitive to insulin. They're not able to respond to the signals from insulin to take glucose into the cells. And what they're finding now is with the progression of diseases like Alzheimer's, that the same thing is happening within the brain, that the cells and the neurons within the brain are not able to respond to the insulin signals. And they are calling this type 3 diabetes. And when we fast in that time-restricted eating pattern of having a 12-hour gap between eating and not eating, it really helps to encourage proper glucose metabolism and help encourage insulin sensitivity so that there is available glucose, which helps to fire up the cells, provide the energy, and enable the cells to function at their best. We also know that time-restricted eating helps to reduce inflammatory markers known as cytokines. We do not want excess inflammation going on in the brain. And all of these factors are recognized as instrumental in the pathological progression of Alzheimer's disease. We already know that time-restricted eating, this fasting approach, is associated with several health benefits, whether it's to do with type 2 diabetes, weight management, heart disease, cardiovascular markers. Previous health mouse studies have identified time-restricted eating with longevity and reduced cancer risk. So it doesn't surprise me that time-restricted eating is now beginning to be associated with benefits with slowing the progression of cognition, cognitive decline, and the risk of the progression of Alzheimer's disease. So start thinking about this 12-hour fast at night. Start to try and eat within that 8-hour window. Typically, I'd say between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. at night. If you can extend that a little bit, so you've been managed 14 hours, even 16 hours on 1 or 2 days a week, that will have some benefits for you. But as a minimum, really try and focus on that 12-hour fast, eating in a 12-hour time-restricted eating window. It's going to have huge benefits for your health overall, but in particular, as we're talking about Alzheimer's Month, World Alzheimer's Month, and World Alzheimer's Day, in really one of the factors in helping to prevent the progression of Alzheimer's disease. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this interesting and useful.